Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. This story starts with a coffee receipt, signed by my wife, but not with my last name. It was a quiet Tuesday. One of those bland, flavorless days where nothing's supposed to happen. I had just come back from the DMV. 3 hours of fluorescent lighting, a number that never got called, and a stranger who smelled like expired pickles. I needed caffeine and a sliver of peace. So I stopped by Café Ember, the one tucked behind the flower shop. It's never crowded, never loud. I've been going there for years. I know the baristas by name. They know I don't take foam. What I didn't know, is that today, Café Ember would serve me something other than coffee. A full-blown betrayal. I was standing at the register, waiting for my order, when the printer coughed up a receipt. The barista squinted at it, turned toward the pickup counter, and called out a name. Not mine. Not even close. She said, "Mallory Graves. Your order's ready." Graves. My wife's name is Mallory, yes. But Graves? That's not our last name. Our last name is Beckley. I blinked. I stepped closer. And there she was, 10 feet away, reaching for that cup like it belonged to her. Smiling at a man I'd never seen. Her fingers touched his when she passed him the muffin. He laughed. She tucked her hair behind her ear, and then she kissed him. Not on the cheek. Not friendly, like I'd been erased. Like 12 years of marriage were just preseason warm-ups. I didn't yell. I didn't walk over. I didn't even blink again. I walked to the counter. I asked the barista for a pen and a fresh receipt. She handed it over like this was just another day. On that blank slip, I wrote 4 words in all caps. "Don't come back home." I handed it to the same barista and nodded toward Mallory. "Give her this," I said. "Tell her it's from her real husband." Then I left. No dramatics. No scene. But the funny thing about walking away? You hope it ends something. What I didn't know is that I just started a game I wasn't ready to play. And her next move? It was disgusting, unforgivable, and very, very public. The receipt should have been the end. It should have been the final nail in whatever coffin our marriage was hiding in. I drove home numb, like someone had scooped out my insides and left just enough behind to steer the wheel. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't cry. I sat on the living room floor, staring at the lamp she bought from that overpriced home goods store she used to drag me into, wondering how long I'd been a placeholder in my own life. I thought maybe she'd show up and try to explain. Make up some pathetic lie. It was just coffee? Or he's a coworker? Or something laughably predictable. But she didn't come home that night, or the next morning. Instead, I woke up to pings. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Group chats I hadn't spoken in for months suddenly lighting up. My college roommate. A coworker I barely knew. Even my cousin from Ohio. All of them texting the same thing in different words. "Dude, is this real? Bro, check Instagram. Now. Please tell me this is a prank." My hands were shaking before I even opened the app. I didn't want to see it. I knew I shouldn't. But curiosity is cruel like that. And there it was. Mallory. My wife. In full makeup and a red dress I'd never seen before. Sitting on the lap of Cafe Guy, now tagged as Jason Graves. His arm around her waist. Her head resting on his shoulder. But that wasn't the worst part. The caption is what killed me. "Starting my real life now." Ring couldn't hide it any longer. "I love you, Jay." A ring emoji. Public declaration. 47 comments and counting. All heart emojis, and finally, "And you deserve this." As if I didn't exist. As if I'd never existed. As if 12 years of my life were just a deleted draft in her story. And the name? Graves. She wasn't just seeing him. She had taken his name, digitally at least. Changed her profile handle, her bio. She wasn't even trying to keep it quiet. I sat there for what felt like hours, scrolling, rereading, hoping it would disappear. But it stayed. Permanent. Public. Perfectly timed to humiliate me. When I finally stood up, the house felt different. Quieter. Colder. I looked around and noticed subtle things were already missing. Her phone charger. A makeup bag. The slippers she always left by the stairs. She had planned this. All of it. The cafe meetup? Not spontaneous. The Instagram post? Scheduled. The name on the receipt? A test to see if I'd react. And the worst part? I didn't even have the strength to hate her. Because deep down, I was still hoping this was a phase. A mistake. Something she'd come crawling back from. That's what heartbreak does to you. It doesn't turn you into a warrior. It turns you into a beggar with no pride left. But pride was about to be the least of my problems. Because the next thing I'd discover wouldn't just break me. It would make me question if I ever even knew who she really was. 2 days. That's how long it took before my name stopped feeling like my own. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. The silence pierced only by the occasional buzz of my phone. I stopped answering messages. People meant well, but their pity tasted sour. Everyone suddenly wanted to be supportive after the damage had already been done. Funny how no one ever notices the cracks until the whole thing collapses. I kept thinking about that Instagram post. Starting my real life now. Real life? What was I then? Practice? A trial run for her big debut as someone else's perfect partner? And then there was the ring emoji. Was that just for show, or had they actually... I couldn't stop myself. I opened her laptop. Yes, still here on the kitchen table like she'd just forgotten it. She hadn't. She didn't need it anymore. Mallory had always been careless with passwords. The same one for everything. Slippers 123. Our cat's name and our anniversary. I typed it in and her email opened like a grave I didn't want to dig. That's when I found it. A confirmation email from a storage facility on the other side of town. Rented under her name. Paid in full for 3 months. Move-in date? The same week as her brunch with Sarah. Unit number 143. My hands were sweating. I knew I shouldn't go. I knew nothing good could come from chasing more truth. But that's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't let you rest until it's wrung every last drop of pain out of you. The place was tucked behind a strip mall, next to a shuttered tanning salon and a sketchy vape shop. The guy at the front desk didn't ask questions. I told him I was picking up for my wife, and he handed me a passcode without blinking. The metal door to Unit 143 groaned as it rolled up. At first, I thought I was in the wrong place. There was barely anything inside. A neatly folded mattress. 3 sealed boxes. A mirror. One of my old coats. But what chilled me, what made my stomach twist, was the framed photo sitting face up on a plastic chair in the center. It was from our wedding. Mallory in her white dress. Me in my crooked tie. Both of us laughing like the world hadn't caught up to us yet. Someone had taken a red marker and drawn a big X across my face. Next to the photo was a notebook. I knew that notebook. I bought it for her last Christmas because she said she wanted to start journaling again. I picked it up with trembling hands. The first page read, Phase 1, Emotional Drift, completed. Phase 2, Exposure and Separation, in progress. Phase 3, Legal and Financial Extraction, pending. There were dates, notes, names I didn't recognize, scribbled arrows and to-do lists. It read like a military operation, only I was the enemy and the war had been going on for months without me knowing. This wasn't an affair. It was a plan. She had orchestrated this, methodically, coldly, like I was nothing more than a problem to be phased out, a stepping stone to her next chapter. I stood there, holding the evidence in my hands, knowing something awful with absolute clarity. Mallory hadn't just left me. She had erased me, and the erasure wasn't over. Because as I stared at that list, one word at the bottom of the page made my blood run cold. Leverage. Whatever that meant, I knew it involved me, and I knew the worst was still coming. I don't know how long I stood there in that storage unit, staring at that word. Leverage. My name wasn't beside it, but I didn't need it to be. Every arrow on that notebook, every task crossed out, every line of that twisted battle plan pointed in one direction. Me. I was the leverage, the stepping stone, the disposable background character in the script of Mallory's so-called real life. I took the notebook, the marked wedding photo, and one of the boxes. I didn't even ask myself if I had the right. That question belonged to a version of me that still believed in mutual respect. That guy had been buried under red marker ink the day she chose Graves over Beckley. Back home, I pried open the box on my kitchen floor. Inside was a collection of receipts, envelopes, and something wrapped in a scarf I bought her on our 5th anniversary. The scarf was just a prop now. Inside it was a flash drive. No label, no context, just a silver stick of quiet dread. I didn't hesitate. I plugged it into my laptop. A single file. Video. Time-stamped from 3 weeks ago. I clicked it. First it was just audio. Muffled. Then it sharpened. Her voice. Mallory. Laughing. Then his Jason Graves. Deep, confident, and obnoxiously smug. She said, "You don't think he suspects anything? Jason. Lyle? Come on. That man is a walking doormat. He'd apologize if you stabbed him with a spoon." More laughter. Mallory. I told him I was going to my cousin's. He didn't even look up from his laptop. God, he's so forgettable. Forgettable. The word stabbed harder than anything I'd read in that notebook. Jason again. So what's next? Once you're officially out? Mallory. I want the condo. And the savings. He'll give it up if he thinks it's his fault. Guilt's his default setting. Jason whistled. You're cold. I love it. Mallory. Cold gets you freedom. I played house for a decade. I'm not doing it broke. They clinked glasses. The recording cut off. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just infidelity. This was character assassination. She had studied me like prey, used my quiet loyalty as a tool, my trust as a weakness, my love as a leash, and now, apparently, I was forgettable. I clicked replay. I needed to burn the sound into my brain. I wanted to remember exactly what I was to her. Because for once in my life, I wasn't going to roll over and beg someone to love me again. Not this time. I backed up the file to the cloud, 2 hard drives, and emailed it to myself. If she wanted leverage, fine. I'd have my own. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but I knew I wouldn't be the one sobbing on the bathroom floor when this war ended. The next morning, I called an attorney. Not a big-name guy. Just someone smart enough to ask the right questions and quiet enough to not leak a single word. And that's when I discovered something even more horrifying. Mallory had already filed for divorce. 2 days before I found her in that café. She hadn't just moved on. She'd started erasing me legally, before I even knew there was a goodbye to expect. She didn't want closure. She wanted control. But if she thought I was just going to hand it to her, she clearly forgot who I used to be before I loved her. And she clearly didn't know the things I'd find next. Because the second box I opened, it had something in it that changed everything. The second box was heavier than I expected. The cardboard was frayed at the edges, and it smelled faintly like her perfume. Cedar bloom. I hated that I still recognized the scent. I hated that even after everything, some part of me still associated that smell with comfort, with home. But this box was no comfort. It was her final insult, wrapped in old memories and weaponized nostalgia. I opened it slowly, half expecting to find more receipts, more calculated betrayals, maybe even another list. But what I found was stranger and somehow worse. At the very top was a small black pouch. Inside it was my wedding ring. Not hers, mine. She must have stolen it. I hadn't realized it was missing. I'd taken it off the night before the cafe incident when I was doing dishes. Like I always did. I thought I'd just misplaced it. Underneath the pouch were photographs. Dozens of them. Not digital. Not on her phone. These were printed. Developed. Purposefully curated. And they weren't from our marriage. They were before it. Me. With Mallory. At parks, on our porch, at Christmas. Smiling like a man who had no idea what was coming. But in each photo, she had written something on the back. In red ink. Could have done better. Fake laugh. Boring. God. This was exhausting. One photo of me cooking dinner had a long message on the back. He thought this was love. It was routine. I could have left 100 times. I didn't because I didn't have an upgrade yet. I nearly dropped the box. These weren't just artifacts. These were her souvenirs. Evidence of how long she'd despised me. How long she'd smiled to my face while cataloging all the ways I disappointed her behind it. Beneath the photos was a folded legal pad. Notes again, but these weren't plans. They were drafts, letters, speeches, maybe even lies she never sent. One page read like a farewell message, but it wasn't for me. It was for Jason. If he finds out before I finish the transfer, stall him. He's too passive to fight. But just in case, we'll need to isolate the account by end of month. Another note. Try not to humiliate him too early. He still thinks I respect him. Still thinks. Those words cut deeper than anything else. Because she was right. I did think she respected me. At least once. I'd accepted all the ways she changed over the years. The growing distance. The sudden interest in networking events. The late-night yoga classes. I excused it all. I thought it was stress, burnout, midlife confusion. But no, it was strategy. She was clearing the runway to launch into her new life, and I was just the luggage she planned to leave behind. That night, I sat on the floor of our living room and stared at everything. The red marker, the lists, the recordings, the ring. I kept thinking of one thing. Why keep all this? Why keep evidence? Unless she didn't think I'd ever find it. Or worse, she wanted me to, because then I'd be the mess, the emotional wreck, the man muttering to himself at 2 a.m. about conspiracies and betrayal. Meanwhile, she'd look composed, collected, mature, ready to move on while I unraveled. It was all perception, a performance, and it was working. But then I spotted something taped to the bottom of the box. A folded document. I pulled it off carefully, my heart already pounding again. It was a bank transfer authorization. Signed, stamped, ready to be submitted. From our joint account to an overseas account in Jason Graves' name. The amount? Almost everything. She hadn't just planned to leave me emotionally, socially, legally. She had planned to strip me down to zero. But what she didn't know is that I had already taken the flash drive to a lawyer. That the copy of her voice and her notebook were sitting on a desk right now, under the eyes of someone who does know how to fight dirty. She may have seen me as passive, but she was about to learn. Even a quiet man has limits, and I had just reached mine. That night I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even sit still. My skin itched like something was crawling under it, like guilt and shame had turned physical. I kept walking in circles around the apartment, the place Mallory and I once called home. Every picture frame, every piece of furniture, every inch of this space had fingerprints of a life I thought we built together. Now it felt like a crime scene. Her smile in those pictures felt like mocking, not memory. I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom. The same one she used to complain was too harsh under the morning light. I looked at my reflection, really looked. What stared back at me wasn't anger. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something far worse, embarrassment. Not just for what she did, but for who I had allowed myself to become under her. Mallory didn't break me overnight. She wore me down piece by piece over the years. Slowly turned me into someone so spineless, so desperate to keep the peace, that I ignored the war happening in plain sight. I let myself become forgettable. And now I was almost erased. Almost. The flash drive, the notebook, the bank transfer form, I still had those. I still had time. But what I didn't have were answers. How long had Jason been in the picture? Was he the first? Were there others? Did Mallory ever love me? Or was I always the placeholder until someone shinier came along? I couldn't sleep without knowing. And I couldn't let her stay in control of the narrative. So I did something I never thought I would. I called her. Blocked number. Straight to voicemail. Of course. So I tried Jason. I had his number. Found it on a printed invitation for some real estate masterclass that was stuffed inside the same box with my defaced wedding photos. I didn't hesitate. I hit dial and waited. He picked up on the third ring, sounding like he was smiling. Hello? You don't know who this is? I said calmly. But I know everything. The café, the plan, the account, the recording. There was a pause, then the fake charm cracked. What do you want? I want you to know, I said slowly, that I'm not going to yell or threaten or beg. That's not who I am. But I have the audio, the documents, the lists, and if Mallory thinks she can bleed me dry and walk into your life with clean hands, she's wrong. This isn't about winning anymore. It's about exposing. You're bluffing, he snapped, but his voice trembled at the edge. I'm not. Then I hung up. I wasn't trying to scare him. I wasn't even sure I could scare someone like him. But I needed to plant doubt. I needed to shake the fantasy he and Mallory had built for themselves. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Mallory. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I let it ring over and over until voicemail caught her voice. The voice that used to say, I love you with quiet certainty. Now it just sounded hollow. I played the message when it came through. Her tone was different, controlled but clipped. No hi, no Lyle. Just, we need to talk. Stop digging. You're going to ruin everything for yourself. For myself. Not for us, not for her. Just me. Even now, she couldn't help but treat me like I was the irrational one. Like she was doing me a favor by leaving cleanly. But I wasn't the one who turned our marriage into a strategy document. I wasn't the one who smiled through teeth while mapping my exit. And I sure wasn't the one siphoning our money into a secret account under another man's name. She had done all of that. And now she wanted peace? No, not yet. Because what I found next, hidden in her old tablet tucked behind the couch cushions, wasn't just another betrayal. It was the kind of secret that doesn't just end a marriage. It destroys everything. The tablet was old, one I thought she stopped using years ago. It was dusty, the charging port bent slightly, probably from the time she dropped it during our trip to Lake Crescent. I remember that trip. I was recovering from bronchitis, and Mallory spent most of the time getting air, on long walks while I stayed in bed with soup and silence. Back then, I believed her. Now, I was plugging that tablet in with shaking hands, wondering if those walks were already rehearsals for her future with someone else. Took a few tries to get it powered on. The screen flickered, the software lagged. There was no password. She probably assumed no one would ever look again. And maybe she was right. Maybe the man I used to be wouldn't have. But I wasn't that man anymore. Inside, everything seemed ordinary at first. Old apps, unread emails, a few Pinterest boards of boho living rooms and wedding cakes she never baked. But the Photos app had a hidden album. Buried behind folders of sunsets and brunches was one titled Work Events. I opened it. There were 36 videos. I watched the first. Mallory sat on a hotel bed, wine glass in hand, her phone propped up on a nightstand. She wore a silk robe I didn't recognize. Jason entered the frame a few seconds later. They kissed. They laughed. And then, Mallory looked at the camera and said, "This is for the record." The date on the video was from last year. A full 10 months before the café. 10 months before I had any idea. In the next video, she walked around an empty condo unit, giving Jason a tour while narrating in a sarcastic tone. And this is where Lyle thinks we're going to retire someday. But we've got better plans, don't we? Jason chuckled behind the camera. Every video was like a dagger. Casual. Cruel. Some of them were candid conversations. Others were performances. Skits they played out mocking me. My hobbies, my voice, even my cooking. One of them mimicked our anniversary dinner. Jason played me, overcooking steak and rambling about Star Wars. Mallory laughed so hard she nearly cried. They called me Background Lyle, like I was a footnote in my own life. But the worst clip, the one that made my skin crawl, was recorded in our home. In my kitchen, Mallory had propped the camera up on the counter and whispered to it, "I'm making him his favorite tonight. Final phase starts in 3 weeks. If he doesn't sign the refinance papers by Friday, I'll guilt him into it." I paused the video. I remembered that meal. Chicken piccata. I thanked her twice because it felt like old times. That same night, she cried during dinner, said she was worried about our financial future, about stability. She asked if I'd help with the paperwork. Told me she trusted me to handle things like I always do. And I did. I signed. Like an idiot. I signed the documents that helped her funnel everything we built into an exit plan she recorded for fun. I backed up the footage. Every clip. every word. I saved them in a folder titled Reality. It was then that I realized something brutal. This wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a psychological dissection. A performance designed for their amusement and my destruction. A private joke stretched out over months, years even. But they made one mistake. They thought I'd never look. That I'd never confront. That I'd go quietly. They thought wrong. The next morning, I met with my lawyer and showed her everything, the footage, the notebook, the emails, the bank transfer, the staged recordings. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something like fury. She said one sentence I'll never forget. "Mr. Beckley, they didn't just betray you. They committed fraud. The game had changed. And in 24 hours, Mallory would get served. Not breakfast in bed, but justice." The strange how endings rarely feel like endings when they actually happen. There's no thunderclap, no cinematic fade to black. Sometimes, it's just a knock at the door at 9:13 a.m. on a sunny Thursday, and a court officer handing over a manila envelope that changes everything. Mallory was served while stepping out of Jason's car. I didn't see it, I didn't need to. My attorney texted me when it was done. According to the officer's notes, she didn't say a word. Just stared at the papers, then at Jason, who apparently muttered, "What the hell is this?" They hadn't seen it coming. Not like this. Not with timelines, documents, recordings, financial transfers, digital evidence so airtight it would take a miracle or a fire to make it disappear. In the following weeks, Mallory's carefully constructed world began to collapse. Jason backed off almost immediately after receiving notice of an impending investigation into the fraudulent transfers. He hired his own lawyer and, from what I was told, began distancing himself entirely. Apparently, she wasn't worth jail time. Mallory tried to call me dozens of times. She left voicemails that sounded more desperate with each attempt. Not apologies. She never used the word sorry. Just excuses. Regrets. "You took it too far, Lyle. We could have handled this like adults. You weren't supposed to retaliate." But I didn't respond. Because this wasn't retaliation. This was survival. And finally, closure. The court sided with me. She lost her claim to the condo, was forced to return the stolen funds, and agreed to drop any further action to avoid criminal charges. In the end, she walked away with less than she started with. I walked away with my dignity. And I rebuilt. It wasn't overnight. Healing isn't pretty. But I moved to a quieter part of town, started therapy, and took on new clients. I stopped flinching every time I opened an email. I cooked for myself, not to impress anyone, just because I finally enjoyed it again. Slippers, our cat, still follows me from room to room. The vet says he's healthier than ever. I guess we both needed space to breathe. Sometimes I still wonder why she did it. Why people who claim to love you can turn so calculated, so cold. But then I remember, people's cruelty is never about you. It's about them. Their emptiness. Their hunger. Their mask slipping. I kept every piece of evidence locked away. Not as a reminder of pain, but proof of who I became when I stopped trying to be liked and started choosing to be respected. And if any of you out there feel like you're being erased or belittled in silence, please know this, you're not invisible. And it's never too late to speak up, stand up, and walk away with your head high. Thanks for following this story to the end. If you've ever been through something similar, or caught someone hiding something shocking, drop your story in the comments. We want to hear it. You've been watching Reddit Confessions. We'll see you in the next one.